In this episode of Ordinary People Podcast, we discuss the need for gun control, the mass shooting in Las Vegas, also the president's reaction to Colin Kaepernick's and the NFL protest. We discuss all that with special guest Mr. Bruce Dorsey. Check it out, all ahead. Peace. Welcome to another episode of Ordinary People Podcast, where it's not about likes and views, but inspiring, motivating, and informing you. Once again, I'm your host, Alan the Great. We have a very packed show today, and we're going to have a special guest who's joining us today to discuss some of the topics and give his extraordinary opinion on several topics that's been happening in the news and in the world lately. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to a friend of the podcast and also has been a guest multiple times on the podcast. I want to introduce you to Mr. Bruce Dorsey, or as many of your clients call you, Coach B. So welcome back to the podcast, Mr. Dorsey. How are you doing?
Thank you, Alan the Great. I'm doing fine, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to be a special guest on the podcast. I've just been so proud of the way you've been growing the podcast and, just continuing to provide the value to our listeners, the quality value that they deserve and that they expect. So thank you. It's an honor.
I appreciate that so much. I appreciate your support as well. Now, today's subject was brought on by you. You texted me and you said you wanted to have a conversation. You wanted to have a police officer come on and talk about how African Americans should conduct themselves during a traffic stop. We had a long conversation about that and feedback on that and just a background on that. Like when I brought that same subject up to several different African Americans, as I explained to you, I didn't get such a positive response to that. So what we did was we discussed it. We had a lengthy conversation about it, and overall we said, you know what? How about we come on and me and you share a conversation on that subject, amongst other subjects, such as gun control and the things that's happening in Las Vegas, as well as the protest with Colin Kaepernick. So I invited you on to have a conversation to kind of see and get your point of view on this controversial topic and allow you to talk to the listeners and explain to them what do you exactly mean by conducting themselves at a traffic stop.
Yeah, and first I want to say that this in no means should excuse that officer from behaving professionally, courteously, respectfully, and everything else. That officer has a duty to protect and serve. That officer should be held accountable to conduct themselves in a manner that represents the oath that they took to serve and protect. So first, I want to get that out the way and make that clear that I am in no way saying that they don't have a responsibility and a duty to treat every human being with dignity and respect. I was basically just thinking about just things that because of the difficulty of that particular officer's job or stress related to that job, even the best of officers and most experienced officers are still human beings, and that they from time to time can basically have a bad day or just get caught up in the emotion of something without properly using their mind and determining the correct course of action. So that being said, I'm just saying as far as we go, there are some things I think that we can do to just make the stop run more smoothly, more comfortable, and make sure that there are no misunderstandings by anybody. And one of that is, I know, just speaking for myself, my own personal experience, because I think it's important that I do that. Just some background history on me. Of course, I'm an African American male. I'm middle-aged, but especially in my younger years, I can honestly say the things that I've experienced would blow people's minds in terms of harassment by police, in terms of being accused of stealing, I mean, things that the average person that speaks about this, you know, couldn't even imagine how they may react. I've been harassed. I've been pulled over constantly. I used to be pulled over so much that I knew the position to assume when I put my hands on the hood of the car. So, you know, but
what are some of the reasons you felt like you were pulled over? Do you feel like it was because you're African American? And do you feel like the way you may have conducted yourself during the traffic stop, do you feel like that helped you come home safely, or did that make it run smoother?
I think it definitely helped it. I think it helped to not escalate the situation. The reason why I felt I was pulled over, again, is what people refer to as racial profiling. At that particular time, I guess I'm thinking I was somewhere around the age of 19, 20. I had a sports car, you know, very, very well maintained, and, hooked up with a lot of the accessories that a lot of young people like to have their car looking nice. And I think that they saw a young African American male in a nice car, and they just wanted to see what I was up to.
So what? Okay, so you said there's ways we can conduct ourselves to improve the way a traffic stop had turns out, meaning that we can lower the chances of it turning into an altercation or a hostile situation. So can you give the listeners a few point of views, or a few of your point of views of what can be done differently to avoid a terrible interaction between that individual and the police officer?
Well, the only thing that I can do is just give the listeners a couple of points on what I have done and what I do to help it to run smoothly. And one is, regardless of whether I'm right or wrong, when the officer comes up, I give the officer respect. Yes, officer. I've definitely asked questions. Was it a particular reason why you pulled me over? Or, basically I very respectful to the officer. I make sure that my hands are where the officer can see them. I just make sure that I just make sure that I treat that officer like I want to be treated, and there has been situations where an officer have been irate at me because the officer said that I cut them off. Now, the thing about that particular situation is, if I did cut the officer off, and honestly, I'm not sure if I did or I didn't, but the officer was irate because the officer said I cut him off. Now, here's the thing. The officer was yelling at the top of his lungs, very upset. So I had to make a decision at that point in time. Am I going to get emotionally wrapped up in the moment and yell back at the officer because I felt disrespected and I feel like he was wrong? Or am I going to think about the situation and take personal accountability for my actions? I can't control his. I can control mine.
Right.
So that being said, I just try to explain to the officer in a nice, calm manner that my apologies, I didn't see you. Maybe you were my blind spot. I don't know, but I honestly did not see you. So I apologize if you felt that I did purposely cut you off. And sometimes, and that officer still didn't want to hear me. He still kept yelling at me in an irate manner, and I had to probably keep saying that to him about 3 times before he finally was able to actually think about exactly what I was saying to him.
Right.
So, and then he was able to, because he kind of snapped back into the moment, and where he heard me, and then he relaxed a little bit more. So
you think about the Philandro Castile situation, and he let the officer know that he was legal to carry a firearm.
Mm-hmm.
Then, by the officer's instructions, he went to reach for his wallet and ended up murdered in front of his girlfriend and child. And you think in that situation where Philando Castile, he followed all the right rules and did all the right things, but ended up dead. And you have to wonder, is there a way that we can conduct ourselves to avoid being murdered? And I think back into my childhood, growing up as an African American in an African American home, you're often taught when you're growing up to kind of conduct yourself a certain way when you encounter police. You're often taught to kind of fear police and have that mentality where you're being respectful to an officer. It's kind of like you're taught that, but as I grown up, I started to see more and more that it really just don't seem like it matters on how we conduct ourselves or how we act. It seems like it's something different there. There's a different element. This is not with all police. We gotta be clear with that, because I don't know where the comments that we don't need police, or if someone's saying all police are bad, I don't know where that's coming from, because no one's saying that. But we have to address the ones who do commit these heinous acts. And you gotta wonder, like, when they do that, like, is it a different element there? Is it racism? Is there an issue there that they just don't like us? And when you think about even slave times and just how they were policing slaves and how that turned out, and you look at it in the context of what we're dealing with today, it kind of like there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of similarities in history into what we're dealing with in context today. And I'm not sure, like most listeners are not sure, if keeping our calm is the solution when you're constantly beaten on, when you're talked to in a form that makes you feel like it's racially charged, if you understand what I'm saying. It feels like the conversation coming from the police is more racially charged than our frustration of a action that we have done. So with that being said, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think there's a couple of different. See, here's the thing that I see the problem as being there's a few different layers to the real problem. Now, first, I want to say that there's good and bad in everything.
Right.
I don't care what religion. I don't care what race. I don't care what organization. There's good and bad in everything, and you can't have one without the other. That being said, I don't necessarily see that a lot of the young people are being taught as we were. That's part of the problem. See, we assume that our experience sometimes is other people's experience, and I don't see where a lot of the young kids today, I mean, for lack of parenting, for lack of community involvement, I don't see that they are being taught the way we were taught. And the other thing is that, the bottom line is low. There are bad apples and everything. So, you have police officers that get up, put on their uniform with a mean spirit, looking for a way to hurt or victimize someone on that road. Yes, that's a fact.
Absolutely.
Now, here's the other thing. I think that those officers who do that yes, we deserve justice. Yes, hang them to the top of the rafters, make them accountable, do it. They should be. It's an outrage. They're breaking every darn code that they ever took to serve.
But that seems to be the biggest issue. That's the key word. I like the words you use, accountability, and that's what seems to be an issue with this. For instance, no one's on here encouraging to do harm to police, and I'm not saying you are. I am, but I want to make that very clear to anybody listening. Nobody's encouraging that. However, if a person or a citizen does harm to a police or shoot a police, one of the things you know is you're going to get the electric chair. You're going to get the death penalty. You can already be assured that if you do harm to a police officer, that you're either going to spend time in jail or you're promised death. Now let's put that in context of a police officer, and let's switch that to a police officer doing harm to a citizen. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about someone pulled a gun on a police officer, they shoot him. I'm talking about excessive force when it was unnecessary. We're seeing multiple cases where there is no accountability being held. The police are not being held accountable for using excessive force, even when they're clearly wrong. So it becomes an issue where it's like, okay, where's the accountability here? We know as citizens, when we do something to the police, regardless of what we say, think, you ain't getting away with it. There's only one end to that. Now, when the police do something, it's the point where the community looking like, wait, what's going on here? What's up? Where's the accountability for us? We just keep seeing it as broadcast through the media where police officers get off, and there's video of it, and it's like, really? So you've seen this guy kill this man, and you're still in him off? It's like, what do they have to do to get accountability? It's like, that's where we at this stage. It's like, what do we have to do to get accountability for the actions of these bad police officers?
Well, here's another thing that I think is important that we talk about and bring up, and that is, and I first I want to say I can see why there are a lot of people who feel like all police, especially if you haven't had any positive interaction with law enforcement, I see why a lot of people could think that most police officers are bad or all of them are bad, and I tell you why. Here's another problem with law enforcement. Now, I personally don't believe the average police officer is bad from the standpoint of intentionally trying to harm a particular race or group. However, the problem as I see it as the ones who aren't won't expose the ones who will. And so people look at it and say, you know what? If you know your partner intentionally did something to harm another person, regardless of what their race, and it's not justified and it is totally wrong and against the oath, then it's their responsibility to expose that person. But see, that's a problem. When they don't do that, people look at it as, well, you're just as guilty as the one who did it.
I feel like it's a double standard that's in society, and I agree with you that they should do that, but I feel like it's a double standard too, just to jump on your side and play devil's advocate. It's like, but in these communities, don't we need the same thing? Like, we need you and the people in the community, not you particularly, but people in the community to do the same thing that we're asking the police to do. We're asking the police to out the bad police officers, but when we're in the community, we're not ousting the guy that lives next door to us to just rob this guy across the street's grandmother. We ain't ousting him. We're not ousting the guy that's robbing the corner store that we all have to use. We're not ousting the guy that's robbing the bank. It's like we're asking police officers to oust their brother or their partner, but in turn, and particularly in the black communities, we're choosing to say, you know what, we're not going to oust them because we're not snitches or we're afraid of retaliation. And we have to wonder, do the police have that same issue? Do they not have to worry about retaliation as well? So I understand that we want the police to oust the others, but we can't have this double standard either. We gotta listen, people, if you don't want the police to oust other officers, we gotta demonstrate the same behavior and oust out these bad apples in our community too. Because at the end of the day, if both sides are playing this game where we're trying to cover each other, cover the bad apples, then eventually we're just going to keep having this friction, and this crack and this division is just going to remain. And it's like I said, this double standard has to walk away too. We can't expect one side to do one thing and the other to say, okay, we're not living by that. We want you to do that. We want you to oust the bad police, but we're not telling on each other. No, we're not going to do that because that's just against our rules. That's just my opinion. I mean, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, but I just feel like, people, I need to express that to people, that you can't have that double standard to expect police to do such. I mean, we do need police to point out the bad ones, but we also need the people in these communities to speak up and stop being afraid about what's going on in your community. The police can't help you if you're not doing that.
Well, Alan, I 100% agree with you, but now I'm a kind of throw another spin on it, and when I throw this spin on it, because there's one thing about me, Alan, and if you haven't seen anything else as far as your the amount of time where you've gotten to know me a little bit, I really try to be objective, and I try to really look at things from all sides, whether I agree with one side or the other. I really try to get a broad view of situations. Now, that being said, your last point, here's what I believe the thing about it is. Myself personally, I agree with you 100% that the community should take a personal responsibility to make sure that this is my thing. If you're a man in the community, if you call yourself a man in the community, my belief is that it's your job to make sure your community, your neighborhood, that there is order. And when I say order, to make sure things are safe for kids and people around you, to make, do your part in making sure your neighborhood is clean and safe, and that it's a breeding ground for everyone to be able to prosper. Now, that being said, with the police department, they took an oath to serve and protect.
Right.
They took an oath, and me for one, regardless of whether the community is doing what they're or not doing something that they should be doing, when I took that oath to serve and protect, yes, there's backlash, and I believe there's definitely backlash in the police department, but again, it all depends on that particular officer and how and whether you're willing to stand on principle, regardless of what happens.
Absolutely.
Now that's from that side of it. As far as the community, it's nothing that upsets me and pains me more to see innocent people in the communities being hit by stray bullets, being gunned down, and I mean that really that's one thing that really bothers me. That's just something that really bothers me, because I mean it's then people will not, they won't stand up. Now here's the thing, as far as retaliation, it takes every willing, able-bodied person to come together to solve the problem. See, if you got one or two people or a couple people trying to stand up, well, of course you're going to be targets. But that's why it takes the community together to take a stand against it by any means necessary. You've got to give the police help. You've got to be willing to go out there and get involved and tell these young brothers and tell people, listen, we love you. We want to help you. It's a better way, but listen, we cannot have you endangering the safety and the lives of people in this neighborhood and community. We just can't have it.
I agree. And segue into a different subject. Like I said, we have a lot to talk about in this particular podcast. Let's talk about community and working together to help. Let's talk about something that happened more recently, the Las Vegas shooting. At the Mandalay Bay, lone gunman chose to gun down concert participants while enjoying a country music concert. During the shooting, 489 total people were injured, where 59 people, including the gunman, were killed during the exchange of gunfire. Now, we talk about community working together and police doing a great job of assisting and helping to serve and protect. Let's touch on that for a second, where many of the concert goers did show that the kind of behavior that you displayed, Mr. Dorsey, with trying to protect and help each other, where concert goers flipped tables, jumped on people who were strangers to protect them from the hail of gunfire that nobody had a clue from. The police also did an amazing job responding to this gunfire in its shooting at the Las Vegas shooting. The lone gunman, we're not sure of why he chose this particular event that happened right outside the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. That's a Las Vegas hotel. However, he did choose to open fire on the crowd. So one of the things we wanted to talk about was gun control. And kind of segueing from our previous conversation, this one, I was talking to a close friend of mine, a gentleman named Angelo, who also has a podcast, Music Cafe podcast. You can check out on Podomatic or on iTunes. Once again, it's Music Cafe podcast. Check it out. And he gave me an interesting perspective that not only goes along with gun control, but also with the previous subject. He said, he talked about some of the bullets that the shooter was trying to acquire before the shooting, which would let him see where the shots was going to, so he could literally streamline the shots. And it made me wonder. I said, well, one of the things I have and issues I have with gun control, and I want you to speak your opinion as well. My opinion on gun control is we do need to be able to have the right to bear arms. Due to the Second Amendment, and one of the rights and the reasons we have right to bear arms, because if the governments get out of control, we need to have the ability as citizens of this country to be able to protect ourselves, not only against the government, but anybody else that intrudes the country. Also, my opinion on gun control is there should not be automatic weapons that use military weapons handled by regular citizens. There shouldn't be armor-piercing bullets being sold to citizens. Because when you think about that, one, You think about the black communities and all the killings in that, where it's being used, automatic weapons that's used to take out mass casualties. Then you got to think about protecting the police officers. If there's armor-piercing bullets out here, then the police officers are limited to their ability to protect themselves while doing the job. Also, Mr. Angelo pointed out a very important perspective. What if during the police meetings in the morning, the police captain says, "Hey, we have reports that armor-piercing bullets are circulating in our community. The police are at higher height, and they're like, okay, now when we're visiting a traffic stop, we have gun on our hip ready to shoot because they're protecting themselves." So it kind of goes to the point where we need to be careful, and we really need gun control, meaning we need to be careful what kind of weapons and weaponry we're allowing on the streets. Now, Mr. Dorsey, I want your opinion on that. And you also talked to me earlier before the show about legislation that's possibly being passed in Delaware. So I want your opinion on what needs to be happening with gun control and on the legislation that you said possibly being passed in Delaware.
Well, my opinion on that is basically I'm a big, very, very big Second Amendment right supporter, as you know. It's funny, I just came from the gun range this morning, and so I'm very big on that, and I think every citizen, every law-abiding citizen should be able to protect themselves. And I agree with you on your stance as far as the type of accessories. And when I say accessories, there's something that's called a bump stock now that they're really trying to ban. And I think right now they're even looking at it in Delaware. Certain political individuals. And for those of you who do not understand what a bump stock is or is supposed to do, I'm reading something here in front of me, and it says it's basically a particular definition of a bump stock. And it says a bump stock replaces a rifle's standard stock, which is the part held against the shoulder. It frees the weapon to slide back and forth rapidly, harnessing the energy from the kickback shooter's feel when the weapon fires. The bump stock basically causes the rifle to rapidly fire again and again. The shooter holds his or her trigger finger in place while maintaining forward pressure on the barrel and backwards pressure on the grip while firing. So basically, the bump fire just allows that shooter to be able to fire rounds a whole lot faster. So, again, now that to me, I don't see any reason why a person would need to have something like that, a civilian. So I agree with you on that. I don't see a reason why they would. And here's my biggest thing. I think as far as gun control, I think that there's no need for any. I think that you just need to enforce the ones you have on the books already. And here's the biggest problem I have. The biggest problem with the people who support banning Second Amendment rights or trying to tighten up on gun legislation and gun control. My problem with it is that here's one thing that they really need to consider. Criminals, I don't care how many laws you pass, a criminal is a criminal is a criminal. A criminal doesn't care how many laws you place because they don't have any intention on following the laws anyway.
Absolutely.
So my point is that so the more laws you pass, although there does need to be restrictions, listen, you're making it harder on law-abiding citizens to be able to properly defend themselves against people who don't care how many laws you pass anyway. That's my biggest problem. Now, do we need to make sure that people are screened properly or that they're checked out in an appropriate manner before they're allowed to own firearms or carry concealed? Yes. I mean, common sense, yes. You can't have anybody just walking around carrying a gun thinking that they're Dirty Harry. No, so I understand that's common sense. But for the average law-abiding citizen who meets the requirements, listen, a lot of these people have protected other citizens. They've saved officers' lives. Some folks who have concealed carry permits. There are a lot of police officers that are in favor of concealed carry because they understand the importance of citizens, good law-abiding citizens, being able to stand in and protect themselves and others if the situation wants.
Absolutely. I can't disagree with anything you just said with that. Honestly, I couldn't, because I agree with you. And one of the things I keep saying to people when they talk about gun control and stricter laws, I'm like, okay, to kind of like piggyback on what you just said, these criminals who got these guns, they're not going to a store and buying them. So the gun control laws you're trying to put on the books are more to control people who are going to the store and purchase. They're focused on people who are going to the store and purchase these guns. Here's the problem. Most of the people who are committing these crimes that's happening every day are not buying these guns from stores. Similarly what you said. And even if you put them laws on the books, they're going to find a way around it. That's why they call it the black market. Because on the black market, you're not buying anything legal. It's all things that you want to buy illegally and at a cheaper price. So you thinking that the black market's going to operate based on gun laws, it's not going to happen. I mean, come on, people. You have to be like real about it and be honest with yourself about what are these gun laws truly focusing on, and who are they going to affect. And most of the people they're going to affect is just people like you and me, Mr. Dorsey, the people who are just trying to get a weapon simply to protect their homes, to protect their families, to protect themselves and other law-abiding citizens who just may be going about their day and have Dirty Harriet who just went and got a gun from Jack across in the alleyway, who just decided, you know what, today I want to rob a bank, or I just want to rob you because you have a nice car. We need that. Also, the guys who are out here just trying to shoot a police officer, just because, for any reason. And I just think we really have to put a lot of thought into gun control and who are we truly trying to target with gun control. And I agree with you. You're controlling the people who are just regular citizens who are trying to protect themselves. And honestly, and anybody's welcome to disagree with me, you're leaving people more vulnerable to be harmed or attacked. Because if we put stricter gun laws, which will affect you or me from having guns in our homes, and criminals know that, aren't we more at risk at being attacked, being targeted, knowing that we can't have guns?
Well, and the other thing, because we have to understand, like you said earlier, and I 100% agree with it too. When they created the Constitution, the Second Amendment right to bear arms, I mean, they're like you said, it's put in there for a reason.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't just for citizens to be able to protect themselves against maybe other citizens who want to do them harm, but also, like you were saying earlier, also in case the government gets to a point where they want to abuse their authority and the citizens of this country. So it was put in there for a reason. I mean, and the bottom line is that, listen, it's been done before. If you go back and look through history, you'll find that governments have disarmed people before.
Yeah.
So people who think that's something that can happen or won't happen, you really need to look at your history and look at some of the things that's happened. But I will say that in a lot of cases, countries who have who've allowed their citizens to their law-abiding citizens to carry openly or concealed, I mean they have a much lower crime rate. I mean that's what I found.
Right.
And the other thing I wanted to say is that the only thing that I think we need to do is we need to just make sure that we teach our youth, we need to teach them to respect all people. I honestly think that even our kids who have interest in guns, I think we ought to be very safe in introducing them to a gun and showing them all the safety that's involved with a gun, and get them to understand, that, hey, this is a serious weapon.
Absolutely.
And it is not a toy. It's not to be played with. But I think we ought to have those discussions with our kids. Well, those of us that are in favor of owning a gun in the first place.
Right.
So it's just I think about being responsible.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned the word responsibility, and you talked about being responsible and teaching our kids how to carry guns and how to interact with guns and the safety measures we need to take and the safety features on guns. And it brings me to another subject, the segue to another subject, where we also spoke about the reason for the Second Amendment was to protect ourselves from the government if at any point they become hostile against citizens or just basically get out of control. And in today's current climate, many are feeling like the government is doing exactly that. And what I mean is, with the Colin Kapernick protests, we see that our current president has spoken out and caused a lot of controversy and interruption in the NFL when him speaking about NFL players or any professional athlete that kneel should be fired or kicked off the field. Also speaking about the Charlestown situation where many white supremacists were marching down the street carrying torches. When you think about in the political sense and just the protest that's going on, what kind of example do you feel our government is showing and displaying why we're dealing with all these different issues, such as police brutality, the disconnect with the police in the community, with gun control? How well do you think our government has been showing us good leadership and how to be responsible with dealing with these issues?
Well, Alan, me and you have had numerous conversations about this particular subject, and so I'm going to, and again, I'm going to just be very candid about it. Me personally, I believe that the government, it's all orchestrated. It's all orchestrated. I think that, I think it's about divide and conquer. I honestly believe that the government or certain political figures I think it's a game. I think that they are trying to divide people of all colors, all races. I believe that a lot of, because people fund the media,
right,
to actually put out certain information for their own benefit. So, and a lot of people will disagree with me. A lot of people just don't want to see it. But the truth is that, listen, it's here's what I say. And I got into this situation with some people that I work with, actually yesterday, as a matter of fact, something similar as far as this whole thing with the kneeling, doing the national anthem and all of that. And these are Caucasians. And, what I found is a lot of them feel like, or at least the ones that I've talked to, feel like they are tired of being labeled as racist. They feel like the media and everybody's acting like they're all racist. All the Caucasian people are racist. And, and this is what I said to them. I said, listen, first things first is that, the only thing you can do is represent yourself in a way that speaks to who you are. Now, you and the other thing that we also have a personal responsibility to do, which people don't do that I see, you need to actually exercise your ability to think for yourself.
Absolutely.
So just because it comes across the media, the TV screen or the internet or Facebook or any other outlet, just because something comes out doesn't mean you have to get emotionally wrapped up in it, because you have to understand until you really, really have done a fact-finding mission, you don't even know if it's true.
That's true.
And so why am I going to sit up there and fight with my neighbor who hasn't done anything to me, hasn't demonstrated that they are against anyone of any particular color, why am I gonna get mad? I mean, see, here's the thing with the kneeling and standing. The bottom line is the folks that say they're disrespecting the flag and they should not be doing it and that on that platform. Listen, the bottom line is that if you believe that, then you're being a hypocrite. And what I'm saying is it's because, listen, America is supposed to be about freedom of speech. It's supposed to be about people, it being a person's right to express themselves, even if you disagree with it. So for you to say that they can or shouldn't do it, you're disrespecting what America's supposed to be standing for yourself.
Exactly. And just to,
so
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. And again, people, they, stuff gets put out there. See, here's the thing. Here's the biggest thing with people. They would rather point the finger than make it their personal responsibility to act and behave in a way that that represents what they like to see in society. Mm-hmm. So if I really am interested in uniting with all people of all races, that means I'm going to represent myself in a way that shows that. That means that I'm going to treat everybody, no matter what color, race, religion, I'm going to treat them like I would anybody else in the circumstances. I'm not going to be, and that's my personal responsibility if I say I want to unite. Absolutely. Regardless of what comes across the TV, no matter what I see on Facebook, no matter what, listen, regardless of that, it's my responsibility to behave in a way that shows what I hope to see in the world.
Right. As a member of the media, I have to speak on the kneeling and the standing thing and the protest. One thing I would like to say, and I previously talked about this in my previous podcast, I touched on this. One thing, I feel like people in society feel like protests should be something of convenience, something that doesn't inconvenience their life, doesn't inconvenience their point of view or how they feel. So most times when people want you to protest, they want you to protest a way that's convenient for society. Meaning, I don't want you marching down the street where I work because I don't want you to inconvenience my ride home or to work. I don't want you to protest during a sporting event because I don't want you to inconvenience me on a Sunday afternoon watching TV.
Football.
Right, it's my football. It's my ride to work. I don't want you to inconvenience me listening to my radio show. I don't want you to inconvenience my program, my daily schedule. Right. Here's the problem with that. Sometimes to get people's attention, you must inconvenience a person to get their personal attention. Think about it. I can sit over here and look at you, Mr. Dorsey, and you maybe watch TV, not ignoring me. I'm pretty sure your wife digs and my wife does it. We're sitting there stuck in the movie and they're asking us questions, and you know what? After a while, you just stay in front of the TV. Mm-hmm. Now, that's inconveniencing what we're doing, watching TV, but they got our attention, right? Now they can talk to us about what's bothering them. And I feel the same way with the protests. I know people say, well, you should do it on social media. Why? Because then you can kind of like, okay, I don't want to read that, so I'll just skip over that page and keep reading. No, it needs to be inconvenienced because it's the only way awareness will be brought to something. So first I have to speak on that, people. Protests are supposed to be of inconvenience. Second thing, we keep having this conversation about disrespecting the flag. Let's talk about disrespecting the flag, and let's talk about disrespecting the military, because I didn't get into this with the last podcast, but as my wife, as I just mentioned, said, she brought something to my attention that I should have spoke on. Let's talk about disrespecting the military for a second. You feel by kneeling for the flag you're disrespecting the military, but let's talk about this. I know many military families and military people who have served and protected this country, protected the rights of these people, the amendments, the Constitution of this country, who are right now in need of medical assistance and who are avoided of that by the country that's supposed, in a system that's supposed to take care of them. I know plenty of military people right now who are homeless, who have no place to go after serving and protecting our country. You want to talk about disrespecting the military? Let's talk about it for a second, people. Let's get into it. Let's talk about that is the ultimate disrespect for people who went out and protected the rights that we have. The freedoms that you enjoy every day, that we take advantage of every day, was put on the line by people, families, who went over to other countries, foreign and domestic, and fought against people who want to kill them, whose mission every single day is to make sure they do not make it back home. Whose mission is, and when we're talking about convenience, is inconveniencing your rights, your freedoms, your beliefs, your choices every day. That's what they represent. However, where is the outcry against that?
Right.
We talk about the outcry against the killing of black people in the black community, but where's the outcry for the military folks who are out here living homeless, who are out here dealing with post-traumatic syndrome? Where's that? There's many of them out here dealing with that, and there's nothing being done to help them be brought and learn how to live back in society after seeing some of the crazy things they see. They're not seeing normal things. When you're seeing kids killed, when you're constantly at danger of being blown up, trust me, you're not able to come back in society and live a regular life. And where is the help for them? So when you want to talk to me about disrespecting the flag and disrespecting the military, let me tell you something, people. You might want to look at yourselves and ask yourself this simple question. What are you choosing to do and bring recognition to the people who are choosing to protect those rights? Yes, it is our right to protest. Yes, it's our right by the Constitution and amendments that we can voice our opinion, such as I'm doing now. However, what about those military that you're choosing to discuss that's being disrespected by the government and the people who live in this life? We celebrate celebrities. We celebrate people who do nonsense on reality shows every single day. However, how much celebration are we doing for the military? For the true heroes, for the true celebrities that truly make sure that we have the right that we have every single day. Me personally, Ordinary People Podcast, we truly respect the military, not because it's the political thing to say, but because that's how I truly feel. Because the rights I feel and the freedom I feel to be able to speak on here is only due to the military. Because if it wasn't for our military, let's be honest, none of us would be sitting here enjoying our right to have a conversation with Mr. Dorsey or my religious views or to talk about gun control or anything. You think about those people who live in those countries who women cannot drive, cannot own land, or people who cannot choose to be Christian, Muslim, or Jewish. Think about that. And you think about what the history of our military did. And talk to me then. Once you address those issues, talk to me then about respecting and disrespecting the flag and the patriotism of this country. Then we can have a conversation. But until you're willing to address that, please do not talk to me about Colin Kaepernick choosing to kneel for the rights and ability of African Americans living in this country without worrying about getting murdered. Let's talk about it then.
Well, we'll see. Right. And Alan, man, I tell you, I love this episode of the Extraordinary People's Podcast. I love it because these are issues that I'm very passionate about. And I'm going to tell you, you are 100% right on that. But here's the thing. People usually don't care about anything unless it directly impacts them or somebody in their family. So a lot of these veterans, I mean, unless your parent is a veteran and they're struggling to help you in some kind of way because of that, or unless it's your mother or father or somebody that you really love that can't get health insurance and they could possibly be on possibly getting ready to check out of here as far as that. People they're not concerned about that. Listen, people won't even hold the door for an older veteran trying to get in. Forget about all this other stuff. People don't even care enough to even hold the door to. You can see the person limping and hurting and sometimes in a wheelchair. They won't even open the door for them.
Yes.
And you want to talk to me about disrespecting the flag?
Exactly.
And not only that, you got and I'm a very big proponent of the military myself in terms of, I mean, my uncle has served. I have multiple relatives, cousins and people that's close that have served in our military in different wars, whether it be Vietnam or Korea or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I'm gonna tell you something. Here's the other problem I have. And that is going back to this, with the government and a lot of the stuff that goes on behind closed doors. And that is that the military people who are upset about this particular athlete disrespecting the flag or kneeling, I've never once heard them talk about the government using the military for their own selfishness. Having our kids being murdered and killed over there fighting wars that we should have nothing to do with. Just because war is big business. Let's not fool ourselves, people.
That's true. Let's
not fool ourselves. War is big business. There are a lot of people, very wealthy people, that make a lot of money by going to war.
And that's absolutely true, and that's an absolute fact. And if you want to fact check that, please do just that. Fact check it and find out how many millionaires who have stock into some of the weapons and companies that produce these weapons is used in military and used in war. What Mr. Dorsey just expressed to you is an absolute fact, not opinion. But with that being said, Mr. Dorsey, once again, I want to thank you for coming on this episode. This has been an explosive episode of the Ordinary People Podcast. I feel like we informed and motivated and inspired a lot of people today. And I want to hear, do you have any final thoughts about this subject or any subject that you feel passionate about or that you feel the audience need to hear about?
The only thing I'd like to say, first of all, I'd like to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come on here and speak and just share with the listeners. I mean, out of the kindness of my heart, share. Not try to put any particular group of people down, any entity, that's not what I'm about. That's not why I'm here. That gets me or anybody nowhere. The only thing I'd like to leave with the audience is, before you point the finger at somebody else, first and foremost, go on a fact-finding mission and find out if it's even true, if it even makes any good sense to you, some of the things that that's being pushed out to you on the media. And the other thing is, the next time you go to point the finger, really ask yourself, really stop and think and ask yourself, what am I doing? What am I doing to bring about the things that I'd like to see in the world today? What am I personally doing to make a positive difference, to make change? And if you say you don't have time, then you don't have time to complain and point the finger at you.
Well,
and that's really all I really have to say. And and again, I can't wait to come back at another point in time in the future and talk to you about some other issues that could be plaguing our communities and state and country at large. Or again, the other thing is I'm still in business. I'm a personal development, transformational life coach, and I help people transform their lives from the inside out. Would love to work with you in any capacity that's convenient to you. And thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. And we'll have, as usual, Mr. Dorsey's information if you would like to utilize his service. He does an important service in transforming and helping you chase your dreams, inspire your dreams, motivating and getting you on a course of life that leads you to success. He's very good at what he's doing. He's very well respected in his profession. So if you're interested in taking advantage of his services, we will help you to get in touch with Mr. Dorsey and to discuss how he possibly can touch your life and help you. Final thoughts from the podcast is this. It's not about what lines are drawn in the sand and what side that you choose. Whether you work with the police or you live in the communities that are affected by the issues of the police, at the end of the day, here's the reality. Without us coming together, without us actually learning to unite and putting our personal differences, our personal opinions to the side, we're never going to get to a point in life where we end all the violence that's happening in the streets. We end the killing and the murdering. So if you are truly affected by it, if you are discouraged by it, if this is something that you're tired of hearing about or you're inconvenienced by it, then here's a solution to it. Work together and be willing to help to put a change and a stop to all the things that's happening in this world. I understand where some people feel like you're not affected by racism or you may not be affected by the issues with the police. But as I always say, nothing, whether it's what people call white privilege or black privilege or whatever privilege, nothing is to actually eliminate you from being affected by the tide that's affecting this earth. Many people have been affected by hurricanes, and regardless of their race, their gender, of their financial situation, many people have been displaced and harmed by a hurricane. The Las Vegas shooting didn't care about a person's race, their financial ability, or their political point of views when he gunned down a bunch of 589 people. So I want you to keep that in mind when you think about your political position. Think about where you stand and understand that despite which you're political, whether you're Republican or Democrat, whether you're for or against the police, Understand something. Tragedy doesn't care about your point of view, doesn't care about your skin color, and it definitely doesn't care about your wallet. It can strike and harm all of us. And the only way we can try to limit and stop tragedy is if we learn, people, to come together, to work together, and to communicate with each other. Martin Luther King may have a dream, and that dream may come true one day, but it's only going to come true with the actions of us and the choices that we make. So today I ask all my listeners to make a choice, to listen to this podcast and not look at it as a point of view of drawing the line and dividing, but as the olive branch, as an opportunity to close that gap and to pull ourselves together. I want to thank you again for listening to another episode of the Ordinary People Podcast. I'm Alan the Great, and I'm saying peace. I want to thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Ordinary People Podcast, where it's not about likes and views, but inspiring, motivating, and informing you. As always, we always encourage you to like the video, to also subscribe to the channel, Alan the Great. Also, if you need or you want to get in contact with me for a special appearance, a motivational speaking event, or any such appearance, please contact me, Ordinary People Podcast number 16 at gmail.com. We also encourage you to comment on the video. Let us know your views on the subjects discussed today, or your point of view on other subjects that were discussed on the podcast. You also can comment there at Ordinary People Podcast number 16 at gmail.com. We want to thank you for your time and for listening. Peace.